Hey guys, it's me, Javier. Today I'm joined by Stephanie Tinsley. She has a new podcast called Everything They Missed. Stephanie, this is your first time doing an investigative journalism podcast, right?
First time.
Wow. That's so crazy. So tell me, how did you stumble upon this case and like why did you decide to pursue it?
I was inspired by another murder, to be honest.
Mhm.
My family got pulled into the Alex Murdoch murders, and your listeners may know that tragedy from the South Carolina attorney who killed his wife and son. And my husband is a trial attorney, Mark Tinsley, worked closely with Alex, and he was featured in the Netflix documentary. Um, I guess it was called The Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by the producers of those true crime shows that were in our house and interviewing him. And I thought, what if I could do something like that? And I was inspired by the really great journalists. And I was also disillusioned by the journalists that exploited victims.
Yeah.
So I went with that in mind of if I could tell a true crime podcast and I could keep victims first, how would I go about it? And that's what Everything They Missed is.
That's so great. This is what I love about podcasting is that people like you could, step into the role of a journalist. And it sounds like I've only listened to the first episode and it's fantastic. It sounds like you're doing it right. You're just pulling the string, seeing where it takes you. You have a hunch that maybe the person accused of this homicide is wrongfully convicted. And you have a hunch that you might know who it is. And I just think that's fascinating. So tell me more about your husband's involvement with the Murdoch murders, because that trial, because I think my audience would find that interesting.
Yes. So they probably will recognize his name. His name is Mark Tinsley. And he filed a lawsuit against Alec Murdoch. He was the attorney for Mallory Beach's family. And she was the young woman who was killed in the boat crash where Paul Murdaugh was driving. In the 911 call, Alex Murdoch refers to the scenario of this could be related to the boat crash. The person that killed my wife and son could be related to the boat crash. What we know now is the lawsuit that my husband filed was the motive for the murders because he had asked for Alex Murdaugh's financial records in relation to the wrongful death lawsuit. Alec at that time had already stolen over $7 million from his clients and was about to be exposed. And this is how psychopaths think. He most likely believed if Paul and Maggie had been murdered, everyone would feel sorry for him and all of the lawsuit and everything would go away. His financial crimes would never be exposed. So my husband was one of the most, I don't want to say popular people in the story, but he was one of the most critical people in the story to expose what Alex had done. And because of that, we had a media firestorm just descend on our home.
Yeah.
So you can imagine Netflix, HBO did a doc. Dateline was here, 48 Hours, all of these crime shows. And I had taken the year to be Mark's media person because he was getting so many media requests. And that's how I met so many journalists and producers and really inspired me to create what we're talking about today.
Well, and let's talk about that. This case, Everything They Missed, the podcast is based off of this case that takes place in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's interesting for me to listen to the podcast because I lived in Memphis, Tennessee for 10 years. So all these places that you're talking about, Cordova, I've been there. Like I know the place, not only the place, but I know the political environment there. And I'm curious, I mean, was, in your opinion, without giving too much away, like, was this just sloppy police work or was there more to it?
So I think that it was hurried police work. Memphis is one of the most dangerous cities in our nation. They have one of the largest murder rates in our nation. So these detectives are overworked and they want to solve cases fast. Danny Harris, who's the victim of the story, had two sons that were in law enforcement. So from the very beginning, there's this pressure to, we've got to solve this because he's one of our own. But a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of things were hurried. They didn't discover the victim's body for 2 months, which is so tragic. But he had been estranged from his family. Yet they wrapped up the investigation in 2 days.
Yeah, because, when you let a crime scene, and a body decompose for that long, you lose a critical window to really, like, study the scene. It makes it much tougher for sure. In my experience as a journalist covering homicides, I covered homicides on my podcast, Criminal Conduct. Law enforcement should not enter a crime scene, a potential crime scene, and just assume that it was a suicide or whatever. They should treat every crime scene like there's a suspicious death, right?
That's right. That's right. And, allowing the victim's son to come in that situation, there were just a lot of things that they missed, and why I titled the podcast Everything They Missed. They didn't collect DNA. Yeah. There was the rag that was stuffed in the victim's mouth. They didn't test it for DNA. They didn't test the comforter he was found on. The air conditioner had been cranked down to below 60 degrees. They didn't dust the AC unit. So there were a lot of things that they missed. And when Andrew Hayes, who is one of the subjects of this story, was pulled into questioning, he didn't know the victim, was not a suspect, was not a witness. He was driving two women up to the police station because they were witnesses. And because he has a 62 IQ, which is equivalent to a third grader, he got wrapped up into this 27-hour interrogation. And at the end was so delirious, he was just saying, "Tell me what you want me to say." And he confessed, and his confession matched no evidence at the scene.
Right. And for the true crime fans out there, that might sound familiar, right? Like Making a Murder,
That's right.
where we have like a false confession. But it also, like your podcast, I haven't listened to, other than the first episode got me hooked. It reminds me of like In the Dark, season 2, or Bone Valley, where this type of journalism actually resulted in, the exoneration of the people that were wrongfully accused, which I think that's the goal, right? And so how hopeful are you that, I don't know, maybe this is a spoiler, but how hopeful are you that your work on this case could impact the case itself?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but I will say the Memphis DA recently had a press conference and expressed that new evidence that my podcast found could be what is releasing Andrew Hayes from prison.
That's unbelievable.
Stunning. It's stunning.
That's very rewarding for you, right? As like this is your first swing at journalism, right?
Yeah,
not
incredibly. Yeah, it's been incredible, and it's also due to the relentless hunt for the real killer.
Yeah.
And what I uncovered in doing so.
That's crazy. And I think it's important to talk about Memphis, the city itself, because in Memphis, like you said, it has a lot of violence, right? A lot of homicides, and you painted a great picture of why they try to speed some of these investigations up. I mean, there's probably not enough resources in the city, right? Like you described, but it's also a very fascinating town. I was early on in my journalist career, I was interviewing for a job in Memphis, and I wasn't sure if I was going to take it or not. And they flew me down to Memphis to the new, and I had, lunch with the news director, met everybody. But then while I was there, the main anchor was interviewing the Memphis mayor, the mayor of Memphis, and he asked him a question and touched his elbow, and they almost got into a fist fight.
Oh gosh! Who was the mayor at the time? Ford?
Mayor Willie Harrington, and I was like, "Oh my God, this town is wild. I have to work here." Because you see, for a journalist, when things like that happen. Like I
Yeah,
wouldn't want
yeah.
to live in a city like with that kind of drama. But for a journalist, like I was like, oh yeah, this is town's gonna have great news because I had just come from a market where nothing happened. Like I remember, on Sundays we would drive around looking for stories, and Memphis, there's always something happening
Right,
in Memphis.
right.
So how much of that good old boy town or like weird politics, how much of that played into this story?
Yeah. So my primary home is in Nashville. And so in choosing Memphis, I knew it was a 3-hour drive and easy to get to. And I wanted to create a show where I was in front of everyone. No Zoom, no phone calls. I'm sitting in their living room. I'm sitting in their offices. So I was in Memphis quite a bit. And I did get a lot of feelings and messages when I would poke around. People would tell me, no one's going to care about this case. Nothing's going to change. You're not going to do anything. This is the 24-year-old Black man in jail. Hey,
Yeah.
we don't care, was kind of the message that I was getting. And also with two of his sons being in law enforcement, it was very intimidating to be there
Yeah.
because I was a little nervous, what could happen to a person that's poking around for an 18-year-old murder. But, the citizens of Memphis, the families that I talked to, most have lived there for generations and generations. And these very poor, humble neighborhoods like Nutbush and Orange Mound. I mean, you hear so much violence in there, but these families lived there for generations. And Andrew's family, when I sat with them, they were just happy that their story was going to be told, even if nothing happened. So it's a town that is built on the blues. It's, music and food and barbecue, and it's classic Southern. Men still open the doors for women.
Yeah.
You hear y'all. I mean, it's still old Southern that we love. And I think when you listen to the show too, you hear that. You hear all the accents. You hear all of the investigators that have been there for decades. And it was just, such a rich experience.
Yeah.
And to capture that in audio was something too. The sound design and production was led first. And so I think that also pays a lot of respect to the story when you spend a lot of time with sound design and production.
Yeah. I'm glad that you gave Memphis more dimension because a lot of people see it as this dangerous place. And yes, that all is true. But then there's this other side. Like, I did not like Memphis for the first 8 years, and I fell in love with it the last 2 years, and I miss it. And I didn't realize how great of a city it was until I went. Like to North Carolina, it's so boring here. Like there's no culture. Like over there, it's just like they're not imitating anybody. They're just doing their own thing, and the food is fantastic, and it has such cool soul. And so I'm glad that comes through in your podcast as well. So, but that's really interesting. So I love the title of your podcast because it almost seems like there's room for another case. Is that in the works?
When titles are hard and when we landed on Everything They Missed, sorry.
It's okay.
I agreed that this sounds like a podcast that could have story after story. What I love so much about the title is Everything They Missed was really a jab at the law enforcement in Memphis. What it resulted in, and I think what you hear in episode 10, the title Everything They Missed takes on a completely different meaning. And it's everything that Andrew Hayes' family missed. It's everything that Andrew himself missed. It's everything. And so, I'm from Music City in Nashville, and we love songwriters and dual meanings and things. And I didn't mean for the title to take on a dual meaning, but I love that it did.
Well, I think you're discovering this phenomenon in journalism where you realize that even the victims have tunnel vision Like they only see the story one way, and law enforcement sees it another way, and everybody has their own perspective, and that's what's great about what you're doing is that you're bringing it all together, and you realize all the things that people miss. And I love the title.
Thank
I
you.
love that it has dual meanings, and I look forward to seeing what you do with it for possible season 2 and beyond. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show, and everybody check out the podcast, Everything They Missed. Lots of episodes out there for you to binge. I'm binging it myself. So thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.